Within the first 100 days, Brexit has already profoundly changed the British economy. And this negative development is far from over. The experts at Ethenea Independent Investors S.A. are sure. According to the latest calculations by the European Commission, the damage to the British economy will be put at more than £40 billion by the end of 2022, explains Tobias Burggraf, portfolio manager at Ethenea. With a gross domestic product of around 2.85 trillion, this corresponds to around 2.25%. By way of comparison, an average loss of around 0.5% is to be expected for the EU countries. The UK and the EU could have agreed on a free trade agreement, which would mean that trade would remain duty-free, or tariff-free, not duty. But at the same time, the bureaucratic effort is increasing significantly. And once again, I talked about this topic before, but I got a little bit additional information in this one, so I'm talking about this again. But one thing I want to make clear, none of anything that's happening since January 1st is new. Although some are using it as propaganda in their headlines always to say the new rules imposed by the EU. Those are old rules. Rules created with the help of the British. On the one side in the WTO, on the other side in the EU. Most of it they are seeing now is WTO. It's not even EU. It's WTO. They are seeing with all the paperwork, bureaucratics and so on. And some few measures are to protect the EU single market. That's true. But it's not the majority of what we're seeing now. Most what we're seeing now, especially in the damages, in the problems, in the barriers, the non-tariff barriers, is just being a third country. And that's something that really has to get into some people's heads. And that's why I'm talking about this topic more often and in some varied details. And now there is more bureaucratic effort, but not as a punishment from the EU. It's just standard for third countries that want to trade with the EU. British companies have to prove that goods exported to the EU were predominantly produced in their own country. Rule of origin. In a globalized economy with sometimes complex supply chains, this is not an easy task, says Burggraf. In addition, there would be health and safety checks, VAT on imports, and other time-consuming obstacles that restrict trade. Many companies, especially small and medium-sized ones, do not feel they are up to the bureaucratic challenges and have temporarily stopped exporting, says Tobias Burggraf. And once again, that is just because they never, when they were in the single market, they never traded with third countries. I mean the companies, not the country. And it's the same with continental European countries from the EU exporting to the UK that are in trouble now. They never exported to any third country because it was too much of a kerfuffle for them, and so they never did. And now, if they want to continue their old business with the UK, they suddenly are in a situation to export to a third country. According to the New York Times, the volume of exports that crossed the channel in January fell by more than 2/3 compared to the previous year. Producers of fish, meat and dairy products are particularly affected, says the portfolio manager, and we all can see that. Sometimes there are reports of tons of rotting food that did not make it through the bureaucratic jungle to the ports of France and the Netherlands. The British financial industry, for a long time the most important center for securities trading in Europe, is also feeling the effects of Brexit. Stock trading for European stock has shifted to continental Europe virtually overnight, particularly to Amsterdam especially and also Paris, while most of the derivatives trading has migrated to New York. The settlement giant Euroclear recently transferred around 50 Irish securities worth around 100 billion euros from London to Brussels. Up until now, Ireland would have relied on the UK-based Euroclear branch Crest to handle securities transactions. And further changes are pending because the rules for future trade relations are still being negotiated, and the first points of contention about the special rules for Northern Ireland show that the Brexit chapter is far from over. In order to avoid controls at the border between Northern Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, the EU Withdrawal Treaty, and once again, that treaty was ratified more than a year ago from both sides. So if you want to discuss on this topic, please make sure you are able to make a difference between the EU-UK Withdrawal Treaty and the TCA, the Trade and Comprehensive Agreement that is not ratified by the EU yet, but those are two completely different treaties. While the TCA is provisionally in force but not ratified, the Withdrawal Treaty is ratified for more than a year now. It is international law. The Withdrawal Treaty provides that the rules of the EU internal market continue to apply to Northern Ireland, and to this end, a goods border between Northern Ireland and the rest of Great Britain is to be introduced, or was to be introduced after the transition period, but no later than the beginning of April. And as I reported a lot, the British government has independently, unilaterally extended this deadline, and that is against the treaty. Because the British government has not withdrawn the announcement, the EU is now going to the European Court of Justice. And if the EU gets right, financial sanctions are threatened. So the tone between London and Brussels is getting rougher. Despite the initial difficulties since leaving the EU, the British pound was able to gain significantly against the euro, but it's not even near where it was. While the British currency was around 110 in December, a pound is already worth 116, 117. On the one hand, this has to do with much more successful vaccination campaign in the UK. And the risk group of over 70-year-old has been vaccinated, and overall half of all the adults in Great Britain has received one dose of vaccination, or a bit more than half. On the other hand, the disappeared uncertainty in connection with Brexit is supporting the currency. Now, according to the widespread opinion of many Brexit supporters, London has its foreign policy and economic fate in its own hands again. And this is not only reflected in the success of the vaccination campaign, which is complete bonkers, but also in the future in strengthened trade relations outside of Europe, for example, with China or the USA. But where is the US trade deal? According to Boris, it should have been there for a long time, because the UK left the EU officially, and all the political parts of the EU, on January 31st, 2020. That is more than a year ago. It's also true, however, that the recovery of the pound started from a historically extremely low level and is still a long way from the pre-Brexit level of over 140. In the short term, the strength of the pound could certainly pick up even further momentum. In the long term, however, it remains to be seen whether London will be able to derive a sustainable economic advantage from the supposedly regained sovereignty and the vaccination lead. But a lot of people doubt that, because when the UK wants to take advantage of the sovereignty, which just as a sovereignty, they had to say, we are part of this, we are part of the EU, we are part of the rules, or then they decided, no, we are going out, so sovereign all along. But the only thing they can do now they couldn't do before is to diverge from the EU standards. But what would that mean? They can do that, no problem. But then the trade towards the EU would change again, because with diverged standards, there suddenly are tariffs. Isn't it bad enough as it is now? So Brexit is damaging both sides, and Brexit will keep on damaging both sides. Those damages will not go away. The treaty, the only thing the TCA did was making sure there's not as much damage as a no deal would have caused on both sides. But it can never prevent all damage that is there, because they're not a member anymore. There is a big gap between the benefits of membership for both sides and the TCA. The gap to the no deal would have been bigger, but it's still a gap, and it's still a lot of damage for both sides, a lot of costs for both sides. It will cost a lot of money, it will cost a lot of jobs, it will cost a lot of trade. And so it will never be without damage. And I mean for both sides, once again. So I'm still waiting for the day everyone will realize that. And if you want to stay informed, please subscribe to my channel. Auf Wiedersehen.